was giggling because I thought maybe I'll call this series "What's Self-Love Got to Do with It." I had a question, which I guess was just funny to me then. Let's see. Morning, everybody. It's not morning. Actually, it might be where you are, Trina. Here, it's evening. I broadcast live from New Orleans. Maybe I should open with that. Live from New Orleans. So what I want to talk about today is how to not judge yourself. And I got this question in my DMs. I was responding and suggested, just being gentle with your inner dialogue and not going towards self-judgment. And she said, I don't know what that is. How do you do that? Morning it is. That's what I thought. And so I was inspired to come out here and answer that. So a lot of the inner things that I talk to, I always say, you don't know you're doing it because you don't know what you're doing most of the time because you don't know what it's not. And in that respect, it's difficult to see where you can make adjustments for greater comfort because you don't know those elements can be adjusted. And one of those is kind of the barrage of inner criticism, which just doesn't sound like, hi, I'm going to be critical today. It sounds like, just a casual conversation about what you could do better or different, or what they're doing, or how you'll explain the choice that you made or the choice you might make later. Like there is, let me breathe a little. There is a familiarity and a subtleness to your inner world that hides a lot of the ways that it makes you miserable. And so self-judgment looks like thinking about how you can be better, how you'll feel relief when the achievements you think that you could get to, just like, it's a lot of, let me just take a breath for a sec. How's everybody doing? Does anyone have any questions? This is a We're All Here Together broadcast. That means blank paper, and I'm pretty much open, but I did come on to talk about self-judgment. And I started by saying, you really don't know that you're judging yourself. You don't know a lot of the ways that you're kicking your own ass because you've always been doing it, and it's usually several layers deep. Let's start there. So in your headspace, you have, and maybe you're just new to, oh shit, there's something happening up here. You have a little bit more space away from it. And what's so trippy is that you are not the voice that sounds like you. You are not that narrator. You are what's listening to the narration. The narration, the techniques, the patterns, the phrasing. Baby, that's all learned. That isn't real. That is a pattern. That is a habit that has been learned. And what I'm trying to say, what I opened with is you do not know how poorly you treat yourself generally because you have always done it. And so with your headspace, usually what we pay attention to is the topic of thought. At first, the topic of thought is usually what other people are doing. Either what they're doing to you or what you think they're thinking about you. Hey girl, hi. Today I'm talking about self-judgment, and I'm also open. And I was just running about how most of the stuff that's going on up here, you don't really recognize as abusive because it's normal to you. And I just started saying, let's look at the layers of thinking. And I started by saying, you have what you're pointed at. This looks like an ice pick to the brain. And that's kind of what it is, but let's actually pretend that this arrow points outward. And at first, when you start paying attention to your headspace, you notice that you're having thoughts about what other people are doing, what other people might be thinking. You're explaining yourself in a way that you care what other people perceive. When you start to point the arrow inward, it still has an element of comparison that is relative to other people. You do not know what to think about or look at except for what you have been trained to look at or think about. And that is let me take some breaths because I got excited. My friend was here and hey, your flowers today were so pretty. So when you have your point of attention, like I was saying, generally it's pointed outside, and then you start to bring it inside and you're like, oh wow, I'm causing these problems for myself. It's not what they're doing, it's how I'm thinking about what they're doing. And oh shit, what they're doing is in response to a choice that I'm making. And oh wow, that goes, back to and so you bring your arrow from the outside to the inside, and then it kind of like bounces back and forth, because what I was saying was that, that inner reflection is still in some ways relative to some kind of external framework, because remember, no thinking, no voice in your head is like real-ish, because you can translate, information in a way that's like real time, etc., but that's more advanced. Like at first, if we're looking in the headspace, really what we're most concerned about is the stuff that doesn't work. The stuff that doesn't work is the stuff that you learned. The stuff that you learned is what you picked up from television, your family, your school, and it's not very obviously taught. It's not like, okay, and when you want to, think about your mate, do this, really it's like, oh, I see when Ross and Rachel do that, and or when like my parents do that, and your brain very subtly is like, okay, cool, got it. This is how we talk about this topic. This is how we interact with this subject. This is the kind of stuff that's okay to say. This is the stuff you shouldn't say. This is the way that you should organize what you're saying to, there are all of these things that you learn to do that you don't know another way for, and so you don't at first think to adjust them. So I'm going to breathe a little and I'll recap. Does anybody have any thoughts, feelings, comments, questions so far? Stories from the crowd? Favorite colors? Okay. So I started today by saying I got a question about like, how do you stop self-judging? Like what is even non-judgment? And then I started to talk about how there is a normalcy to your inner world because most of it has never not been. And you can, as you progress, start to see what isn't. It's like the light gets brighter and you can see what you're doing. And then you have a comparison point. But in the beginning, it's just kind of like, oh, that's just the way that it is. So you don't think like, I could feel better if that stopped, because you don't know that that is a thing. Like it doesn't stand out at all. Then I started to talk about, well, there are layers of thinking, and the first layer is really like the topic. What are you topically focused on? And generally we're topically focused externally until you start to pull the arrow internally and see like, oh, I'm the source of my discomfort. I'm the source of my power, of my problems, of my joy, of my happiness, of my sadness, I am. But when you're doing that layer, so you've got like the topic is on the outside and the topic is on the inside, there are layers behind it that judge, that apply frameworks that are learned. There are elements of your thinking you do not see because they have always been. And one of them is the critic's voice, and that's kind of what we're looking at when we talk about self-judgment. When we look in the mirror and the scales, so you're overweight, how do you love yourself no matter your size? Okay, so that's a great question, and that's a great way to kind of explain what I'm talking about when there are layers. So we have the topic, which is the weight, and then behind that, there is an idea of what is like ideal, and the gap between those is what makes what you're perceiving, what the arrow is pointed at, wrong, which generates the emotional response, which generates the sadness, which generates the but it's not the topic that is the problem. It is the frame through which it is viewed. And behind the frame, behind even the benchmark, is the idea that matters, that anything about how we look or the way that we're shaped has anything to do about our worth or our value. And so I'm so easily distracted tonight. I feel like I'm riding a fucking Bronco. And I keep falling off and I'm like, I'm gonna get back on. But she's moving so fast. The energy the past couple, was it today? It started last night. But today, oh man, it wasn't. Anyhow. So Trina, to kind of like back into to your answer. So the first is to recognize the reason that it doesn't occur to you as okay is because you learned that it's not. And when you look at what creates that framework, it's a lot of people and things that make money from you not quite being happy. You know what I'm saying? And so just having a little space from that frame and saying like, like, who does this benefit? Well, that doesn't really benefit me, and it's not that anyone has to be bad. It's just that, it's marketing, it's pushing the emotional buttons so people are inspired to take action. And as part of that, like, there is this ideal that is trained, but ideal for who and for what, So I'd say the first is, like, when you start to, this is I guess the crux of what I'm going to get to today. So we've got the topic, which is weight. And then I said you look at that through the frame of an idea of what it should be. And then behind that is an idea of what establishes worth as an individual. And so the topic is where we focus changing. Like, how do I make the weight change so I feel better? And I'm saying you can move the frame. Like, where did I get the measurement? Where did I get the idea I should look this way or look that way? Is that valid for me? Is that helpful? Is that healthy for me? And when we're looking at fitness and nutrition and stuff, as you know, I think, Trina, I've spent probably at least 6 years in that industry. And what was I gonna say? Oh, what I came to in kind of driving behavior change is that the healthiest thing that you can do if you want to change the way your body looks is to love the way that it looks now. Why? Pick me. Because you create a hormone environment that is of a lower or lesser stress level. And you know what that supports? Body composition. So when we're coming at weight loss, nutrition, exercise from a pressurized standpoint, it is so counterproductive because you are elevating the body's state of fight or flight. And you know what the body doesn't want to do when it's scared? Burn fat. And so actually the most effective thing you can do if you want to lose body fat is to love the body fat that you have. And it does, so when I'm teaching some kind of transformation appreciation like this to a client, I usually use a kitchen remodel. So let's say you have like a pretty nice kitchen and you tore the shit apart because you're going to put in a new one. And when you bring people through the house, through the kitchen that's pulled apart in the middle of the remodel, if you know you have solid blueprints, you know that the project is funded, you know where it's going, you're not like, oh my God, my kitchen, don't look, judge me. You're like, no, the kitchen's going through a remodel. It's going to be fine. Like, let's go over here to the living room. So similarly, when you're going through personal transformation, there's a period where it's not going to look like the vision. And your job in that point is not to give a fuck what anybody else thinks or feels, because you know where it's going. And where it's going doesn't necessarily have to have external evidence. Nobody needs to measure or get your success, only you. So the destination is really a place of acceptance of self. Because again, being in that industry for a minute, I'll tell you that when people get to a certain body type, shape, weight, etc., it's generally not enough for them to feel good about themselves, because that's not the problem. The problem is that fundamental idea. So we have what we think we should look like, or we have what we're looking at, the body or the body weight, and we have what we think it should be, which causes discomfort. And then behind that, we have even that it matters, even that there is like that's even something to look at. A child doesn't think like, oh, like, what about my thighs? Like, it's not, it doesn't think that. So that is, where was I running? I was saying that you can question those layers, and then here's what I was going to say was the crux, is like, you take the topic down. Oh, I remember. I was talking about creating an environment hormonally and chemically that is supportive of fat loss, which is actually self-love, where you're not saying like, this is wrong, and your body is saying, I'm being rejected, I'm being threatened, hold on to everything. If and it's so fucking silly, but you can do little things just like touching your flesh with love, like you would pet a cat or a kid that you like really just applying love to your body with your own hands, and like, wow, this is my skin, like get to know it in a way that's not judgmental. It's just curious. Wow, where's the edge here? Oh, I didn't know I had that dot. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that interesting? Self-rejection, as far as I can tell, is the fundamental problem that we're facing as a society. And that's why I'm coming at it as self-love as a solution, because self-rejection is the same as rejecting life, is the rejection of God. It's kind of like it turns the whole canoe over. So when I was talking about the crux, and I actually don't know the definition of that word, and maybe that's not the appropriate word, but what you want to do to make a problem that you're looking at. So again, the problem is the number on the scale. The problem is the body shape. When you don't want that problem anymore, you recognize that it is the patterns of thinking that generate the pattern of focus, which is generating the discomfort. This isn't the problem. The pattern is the problem, and the pattern is learned, and you can unlearn the pattern by letting it grow over, which means every time your brain wants to go to that topic and think its way around it, you say, shh, look over here. Oh, look, you love the color blue. Like, look over there. Like, hey, did you feel your lungs recently? What about if you what if you make a noise? And it's so fucking silly, but that's all that it takes to retrain the pattern, because it's not where the arrow points. It is the pattern of pointing and the layers of thinking that create the discomfort. And so that's kind of, I opened this today and I said, thank you. Did I answer your question? Did that help? If it didn't, please tell me so I can answer it while we're here. So I opened today and I said we're going to talk about self-rejection and like, how do you not self-reject? That is how you don't self-reject, or I'm sorry, I talked about how to not self-judge. And that's how you stop self-judging. You realize that what you're judging yourself about is a learned frame that's likely not helpful to you, an individual in this unique moment in time that's never been. And then recognizing too that sits on top a whole idea, a whole bucket full of ideas about what life is that are learned, not absolute. So you have this whole momentum, this whole pattern of thinking and focus that isn't really of value. And just like I was talking about how you want to create an environment where your body feels or your body feels safe if you want to make a change. That is true whether you want to lose weight or you want to do a new habit. When I am working with somebody and breaking through a habit wall, either where they are not doing something they want to or they're doing something they don't want to do, the first thing I do is make it okay. Oh, fuck. Make it okay. Make it okay. And when you do that, you help take your body out of fight or flight. You're not going to do massive transformational work if you're scared out of your mind. And again, with the layers of thinking, it doesn't ever, you're not hearing, you're really scared. What you're hearing is, do you want to have another snack? What you're hearing is, those motherfuckers sent you that message again. How, you're not hearing what the true cause is, generally. And the true cause is, like I was saying, some level of self-rejection. And so to get to that, you start to be kind to yourself about what you're doing or what you're not doing. And in that, you create personal safety. And for personal safety, then there's the possibility of change is there. Get so excited. Okay. I think that's all I have tonight. Does anybody have any other questions, thoughts, feelings? So I'll recap one more time. Although I'm not sure if anybody ever gets to the end of the video, so it doesn't matter. It's helpful to me, I think, just to practice training my mind to remember what I said and why I said it. So I'll do it. I just realized I have 2 birds on my wall. That's so crazy. Life's so crazy. I did all this, like, not this decorating. I'm glad. Thank you for letting me know, Trina. And it turns out these birds I have on my comforter are peacocks, and then I have this peacock painting, but, you know, it's interesting how things come together. All right, so today, and this might be helpful for me to remember. Love you to summarize just the end part. So today, what I wanted to talk about was self-judgment, how to not self-judge. And I started by saying most of what you experience and hear, you don't realize there are other options for, because it's always been there. And you have been trained to have patterns of thinking and focus that seem like, oh, this is real, this is reality. Of course we're concerned about our weight. Of course we're concerned about what the neighbors think. Of course we're concerned about money. Like, those are focal points that are trained. And you don't know that not other people are thinking that way. You do not know what other people's headspaces are like, most likely. And so it's difficult to be like, oh, wow, I don't have to do that. I don't have to talk to myself that way. I don't have to think about those things. I could think about, like, it's very hard to see where and what has always been. Thanks, ladies. And I was emphasizing, as I generally do in these broadcasts, that there are layers to thinking. And the point of focus is usually what gets all the attention, but it is the pattern of focus, the pattern of thinking. Where are you getting the idea to look there? How are you measuring it? Why do you think that's important? This is where you can make really substantial change in the quality of your experience by dropping patterns of focus you don't need to have. As simple as, like, I'll tell you this one. For me, one of my patterns of focusing was like, how do I get away from this dude? Not helpful. Not something I need to think, but I thought I needed to think that. And you know what I created in the thinking of it? That experience. And it really takes a moment of, like, really, like, I guess it just takes a moment to be like, what am I doing? Why do I think that? And to really, like, one of the most helpful tools in cleaning up your headspace is to dump it out. You tell somebody the craziest shit you're thinking, and when you say it, you're like, well, I don't really think that, and then it loses some of its power inside. And or someone can say, like, well, you also think, or they can help you sort it out. And when I was bringing my headspace to clarity in some of the more tender areas, I tell people, like, hey, look, this shit's crazy. I know this is crazy, but I'm going to tell you because I need to put this down. Like, are you in a sex ring? Real question I asked somebody. I was like, I have no real reason to think this except a few comments that you made. And like, so, like, I'm just going to say it. Eventually you come to a place where you're not afraid of your own thoughts then. And when you're not afraid of your own thoughts, you'll look at them more directly. And when you look at them more directly, a lot of them are like, oh, that's so silly. And you either laugh or you stop entertaining it. And again, like, it's tough to have the space away from yourself to see what's real and what's not real. If you didn't think it was real, you wouldn't be thinking about it. So it can help. Like, think of it like this. If you're in high school and you're having some like drama and you wrote a journal entry, and then later, like 15 years later, you read it and you're like, oh, that's so silly, she thought this. That's the kind of space you want to have from your head, where it's like you write it down and you can look at it a little like, oh man, that's crazy. I love you, but that's so silly. And then it loses its grip, and that's really all we need to do is like get the grip to loosen, because there is like the body, like while I am talking about the mind sort of being a challenge, there is also an intelligence to the being that once you start to intend and organize yourself towards a better environment, inner environment, it'll help you. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. There just needs to be a willingness and generally just a commitment to the practice. Like, just keep trying. And self-judgment is saying, like, I should be faster, better. You know, self-judgment is applying an idea you have about what should be to what is in a way that makes you feel bad about it. When you don't know, babe, you don't know. So I had just started all of that by saying, like, I'm going to practice recapping. But I've been out here for a minute. I don't want to make this too long. So in short, the recap is, if you want to stop judging yourself, practice noticing when you're talking about a topic, a point of focus that you're judging of yourself about, and very gently just put the topic down. Just put the topic down. And you can do that by paying attention to your breathing. Get really interested. It's the air coming in equally through my two lungs. Look at colors around you. Do something with where you are. Wiggle around. And eventually then you get a little bit space from that topic, and you can see what you learned that is not serving you in how you're thinking about it and what you're saying about it, and then you can start to make new choices. And then that has a snowball effect, because once you start to see, like, oh wow, this isn't what I thought it is, you can take that oh wow to other places and sort of say, like, well, is this what I think it is? And you can then change, like, your inner experience without your outer world changing at all, which means, like, you can be happy and start to feel better about your life with nothing outside of you changing. Nothing outside of you changing. Isn't that fucking awesome? So cool. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Most of my broadcasts are available on youtube.com/The Shaylee Show. I also work with clients one-to-one to help them sort out their headspace. If you're interested in that, go to habitbook.com and book an info call. And I will very honestly tell you what I think you're saying, and if I think it's something I can add to, or if I'll tell you what I hear you want to do. I'll tell you where I think you are, and I'll outline what I think that trajectory, like to bridge that, would look like with me. All right, everybody, have a great night.